What is the best martial art for street fights?
So when we get into these questions for what is the best martial art for fill in the blank, a lot of the times is largely subjective. It depends on the actual individual using it. However, most people would consider MMA to fit that role, or worse, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to fill that role. So, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a good martial art, but it has, especially in modern context, the way it's largely taught to the masses nowadays, has very large deficiencies in it that can't go unannounced if you're learning it for street fighting. Just like mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts, for one, isn't a martial art. It's a concept of learning. It's a strategy to learn multiple different systems at the same time. It itself is not a codified system martial art. However, a lot of people would say MMA is the system that would probably work best because it teaches a little bit of everything. It teaches the stand-up striking, some stand-up grappling, and then ground grappling as well. However, BJJ, MMA, and a lot of other systems don't discuss the elephant in the room, and that is BJJ and MMA and most of these other systems that are largely designed for sport now. They all spar, but they spar within this context of rule and regulation to keep training partners safe or relatively safe while training at a relatively high intensity. And that's good for the gym or for sportive competitions, whatever. However, in what it really lacks is because of these regulations, the practitioners that study these arts very rarely learn what they need to for actual self-defense or street fighting applications. And one of those main things is just your mental intent. When you're out there in a real life environment, it's a completely different intent. When I'm learning BJJ or MMA and I'm expecting to go fight someone, I'm mentally prepared to fight someone in the sportive context. When you're in a street fight or something that's not a consensual encounter, the intent is completely different. The intent is, I'm going to win by any means necessary because I don't know if this person is planning on killing me to get what they want. And so that also brings us into different implications then of, is he armed or unarmed? Do we know if they're armed at all? Am I armed? Are they able to access any weapons, or do they have any weapons? If they do, how do I deal with these weapons? In which the questions like this are never answered within MMA and very rarely answered in BJJ. In addition to that, when they are tried, when they're attempted to be answered in things like MMA or BJJ, they find the way they fight drastically changes because there's a different way you must fight when you have an armed opponent, especially with an edged weapon. A lot of the grapples and the way that sport of BJJ is taught will get you stabbed or cut if you're fighting someone with an edged weapon. And we see this more often than not. High-end MMA fighters, elite MMA, UFC fighters, they get into these street encounters, or sometimes they get someone that breaks into their home and they find themselves fighting with this person, and they're used to these conflicts. However, when they're interviewed later on, they say, that was the hardest fight of my life, and that guy had zero training. And the difference was that guy had an intent to kill that other person. You don't get that in most martial arts systems. So, going back to the self-defense aspect of it, the the best system is the one that really prepares you for all of those, and it's really hard to say which systems do that, and I don't think a lot of them do. The Seiyo-Ryu Aikibujutsu system does do that, but it's still, there's only so much you can put out in a training environment and keep it relatively safe.